Welcome back! In the last video, I showed you how to prepare and sew the fit sample for this jacket using Simplicity Pattern 8741. So we have our fit sample, and I already know I want to make this a cropped jacket. I want it to hit right around my natural waist. The sleeve length is good where it is, and I can bend my arms with plenty of room in there for more winter layers. Fitting on yourself is tedious. There's a lot of on and off with the garment to pin and repin until you get it right. With the jacket shortened, I see the back flares out a lot. I like the oversized look, but the back is too much. I'm going to take it in. With fittings and pattern alterations, there's always going to be cause and effect. Keep an eye on what else is changing when you make an alteration. When I took in the back, I noticed the center front is laying off center now, so I'm pinching out a bit at the front shoulder to bring it back to center. See how it's laying straight again? But that makes the neck come up too high, so I'm going to put a pin where I want the neck to come down to. I was going to mark the lines for the stripes on the fit sample, but I'd rather see it on the fur, so I decided to do it flat on the table. I cut the green fur into strips and laid them out in different patterns to see what I liked best. I decided on 4 inches of black fur and 1 1/4 of green fur. Now that we have a plan for the style lines, let's get back to our pattern. I'm marking all of the alterations with a friction pin, so mark where the hem ends, mark on both sides of the pin at the neck, and both sides of center back pins. I forgot about the neck, so mark there too, and then you can take out all the pins. The hem is coming up 2.5 inches, so I can mark that out on my pattern. But I know that I need a 1/2 inch seam allowance too, so I'm only marking out 2 inches. I pinned out 3.5 at the center back, so I will mark the pattern half of that because it's on the fold. So I'm taking it in 1 3/4 at the bottom to 0 at the neck seam line, which is a 1/2 inch below the paper edge. Now with the new center back, the bottom hem is not straight anymore, so I'm adjusting it back to a 90-degree angle. Go ahead and cut those pattern revisions. Now I'm measuring how much was pinned out of the shoulder, marking that on my pattern to 0 at the shoulder seam and cutting it out. And I'm measuring and marking where the neck should drop, redrawing the curve and cutting that too. Since I didn't draw the style lines when I had on the fit sample, I'm putting fur strips on the pattern piece and marking it on there. Now I can see where approximately I want the stripes to start, and I can mark them more accurately with a ruler. I've drawn out 2 lines 1 1/4 inches apart, and then I'm measuring down 4 inches to draw the next 1 1/4 inch stripe. Continue down the front body and then transfer one of the stripes to the back pattern piece by putting the back on top of the front and tracing where the lines are at the side seam. Then continue the lines up the body like we did on the front. On the sleeve, I'm folding it along the middle based on this center drill hole because I'm going to make a chevron down that line. Now I'm lining up the sleeve inseam and the body side seam to mark where the first stripe of the torso is. Then trace the line onto the back of the sleeve, double check against the back pattern piece, and then finish drawing the stripe. Continue the stripes up and down the sleeve in the same way as the body stripes. At the sleeve cap, the stripes get too awkward because of the curves, so those won't line up. I'd rather have equal spacing on the sleeve than try to squeeze in those 2 stripes. Plus, with the long pile of the fur, I think it's going to look fine. Before we cut the pattern pieces apart, we should cut the lining. I'm using the chevron print satin. Line up the pattern pieces along the grain line of the fabric and cut, notch, and mark the drill holes. On the sleeve, I'm adding a 1/2 inch at the hem because I like the length of the fit sample and I don't want it to get shorter with the seam turned up. One more thing before we cut the pattern apart is to label or number each section. I like to color code them, so black Sharpie for the black fur pieces and green Sharpie for the green fur pieces. At last, we can cut the pattern apart and start marking the fur. First, check your fur and mark the direction of the pile on the back. You don't want to cut the fur out upside down. Since I cut my pattern piece at the style lines, I'm making sure to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance to each piece as I mark it. I'm marking with a Sharpie and labeling each piece. The sleeve and front pieces need a mirror of each piece, so I mark the mirror piece with an X to keep them separated. If you're using a light color fur, make sure the Sharpie doesn't bleed through at all. When you're ready to cut the fur, if your fur has a stable backing, you can use an X-Acto knife like I'm using. It's faster than scissors and doesn't usually cut through the pile. If the X-Acto knife doesn't work for your fur, and you have to use scissors, just be sure to dig the blade of the scissor under the pile and cut just the backing fabric. After I cut each piece, I pull firmly at the edges to remove the loose fur. This helps keep your work area a little cleaner. Repeat this process for the second color of fur, and the third if you're getting really ambitious. On the black fur, I would normally use a silver Sharpie, but I don't have one right now, so I'm using tailor's chalk. There's fur in my nose and my eyes and all over my clothes. Ugh. Ugh, so much cutting. Finally, everything is cut. I sorted and piled the pieces in order for each pattern piece. And that's enough for today. We'll sew this fur baby together in the next video.